My name is Yvonne Horsfield, and my grandfather was Hedley Tongway, which he later converted to Hedley Way. Hedley was born here. He was an Australian born, but he was full Chinese because he had a Chinese mother and a Chinese father. They both were born in China, and he felt that he was an Australian citizen and he was extremely proud of it. And in those days, there was a lot of pressure for the Chinese to assimilate into the community and become Australian. And so he felt that it was his duty to actually enlist and make a contribution to the war effort. And he was very, very keen to do so. He tried to enlist twice before he was finally accepted. And the reason he was rejected was because he had Chinese blood. He looked pure Chinese, and so they were not accepted. He and his brother, Samuel, neither of them were accepted when they applied. Samuel was particularly upset simply because he was accepted for 2 weeks and started his training, and then he was marched to the headquarters and told that he was no longer acceptable because he was Chinese. Both brothers, they felt really upset about the fact that they weren't accepted initially, but by 1917, the casualty list was so extreme, they applied again, and both were given a special exemption and accepted. And Samuel went into the medical corps at first, and Hedley went into the signals. Both brothers ended up in the 5th Divisional Signals because Sam found he couldn't carry the stretchers. He was a little man, and he found that, he wasn't strong enough to cope with everything demanded of him in the medical corps. So they both ended up in the same area of signals. They didn't really cross paths very much during the war because Hedley enlisted before Sam, and it was Hedley that actually went to France before his brother, and he did see action and he was promoted to corporal, whereas Sam arrived just in time for the armistice to be signed. So he didn't actually see action like Hedley did. Well, I adored my grandfather. I remember little snatches like creeping up the stairs. It was a double-storey building, and sitting there listening to him playing the violin. Well, trips in the car that he used to call the Flea. His father was Reverend John Tongway. Reverend Tongway himself was quite poor. He was paid a very low wage by the Presbyterian Church. He couldn't afford to send them to higher education, but he encouraged them to win scholarships. And that's exactly what they did. They worked hard at their education, won scholarships, and went on to secondary education. I was contacted by somebody who said that their grandfather was a great friend of Hedley's during the war. And when they first met up, he recorded in his diary, "Goodness me, there's a chow in the army." And he was obviously quite racially prejudiced at that stage, but they were thrown together to work together, and he suddenly developed a great respect for Hedley and said, "I never realised he was a clever, well-educated man." And so he completely reversed his opinion, and they became firm friends right throughout the war. After the war, he actually applied for and gained a soldier settlement plot. But unfortunately, he was never really cut out for farming. But because he'd been to the war, he was well accepted locally, and they grew to really befriend Hedley and help him in many cases with advice about his farming. And it was only at the end of the 2-year period that he suddenly realised he wasn't going to make a success of farming, and it was physically very demanding. He had asthma problems because he'd been gassed during the war. He eventually applied for the public service and in the lands department because he had good qualifications and he was very, very good at mathematics. That may have been an added advantage. I think he had his entire career from then on in the public service.